YouTube, what's going on? Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast this morning here for Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. Got a little Auburn football sports talk and going to talk about a few other things as we start off the second week of fall camp, which has been kind of eventful for the Auburn Tigers and got a lot of moving parts that are going on. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Here in the Deep South, college football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. And on this channel, it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger. Auburn capping off a very, very good first week of fall camp. As a matter of fact, culminating with a scrimmage the other day that yielded a domination, so to speak, by the defense. Smoke Monday with a big play. Also, Harold Joyner with that 65-yard run that's got folks thinking, man, what's up with Harold Joyner, man? Is he going to make some noise as far as being some type of threat in the backfield? Come on, guys. Let's go ahead and get the shares going. Go ahead and share this video, and let's get the action going for this week. Man, can y'all believe it? It is literally a couple of weeks away from the Advocare Classic, about less than 14 days until week 0, where Florida will be taking on Miami. A very highly anticipated game, by the way. I don't know. It's going to answer a lot of questions for me because, I think Miami is probably going to be a little bit better than what folks think. I'm not sure how much stock we can put on Florida's late season run, especially with that bowl game where a few guys from Michigan were not in that game, not to discount Florida in any way. But we'll get some answers as to where the Florida Gators are headed going into the 2019 season. Have had some issues in the offseason with some guys transferring and all those different kind of things. Dan Mullen still getting on social media talking crap. As a matter of fact, Kirby Smart even responded saying, look, man, we don't talk. We respond with our helmets. Big shout out to Kirby Smart. Georgia also expecting a big season starting out their season against Vanderbilt, which is an SEC division foe. I remember a couple of years ago in 2014, I was a little anxious about Auburn actually having to start out with a division foe playing against Arkansas. And on top of that, having to start the season off with backup quarterback Jeremy Johnson, who did relatively well. In that game, though, I did see a lot of errant passes where the guys just went up and got it. Sure enough, the second half, Nick Marshall comes in and takes over, and the rest of that season is history. 8-5 for the Auburn Tigers coming into that season with some big expectations. So as we rewind this thing back, talking about some of the things from last week, Tank Bigsby, as most media outlets predicted, and I predicted on my channel that he would commit to Auburn, winds up as the first running back commitment for the 2020 season. Very important because I think Auburn needs to continue to add to the talent that is already there at the running back position. You talk about Mark Anthony Richards also, although going through some surgery right now, and then you got Cam Martin. He's going into his senior year. We want to see what he can do as a running back for the Auburn Tigers this year. And, of course, Boobie Whitlow, we're really big on him. Just a nice feel-good story. If you want to talk about a guy in the midnight hour, winds up getting an offer from Auburn. Now, let me tell you how that's got to feel. You're talking about a guy that was, went to Lafayette High School. I'm very familiar with that school because, as a matter of fact, my high school actually played against them. So I kind of know the feelings and the sentiments of a guy playing at a small school and having the opportunity to take his show to one of the biggest stages in the sports arena, period. Power 5 football, SEC football, and Auburn football. We love Auburn football over here. And he really did pretty good. Outside of injury, I think Boobie Whitlow has a 1,000-yard season last year. So that's the thing going into week 2 that we want to really talk about is the running back position for Auburn, a grossly diverse backfield, almost dysfunctional because you have, on one hand, you have Boobie Whitlow, which is somewhat of a power running back, still kind of trying to hone his skills as a running back because if you all remember during his recruitment, he was actually a quarterback for Lafayette High School and had a lot of rushing yards. So he had to kind of season himself not only as a running back, but you're talking about taking the running back situation to an SEC school. And I think it translated pretty well. Now, he had some fundamental issues. He had some ball protection issues. But I still think Boobie Whitlow, out of all the analysis that I've done, even with DJ Williams kind of making some noise in the spring game, I think Boobie Whitlow is your guy to start the season off at the running back position for the Auburn Tigers. And we didn't get a lot of news as far as that goes, as far as Boobie Whitlow goes, but we do know that Harold Joyner had that big 65-yard run. We also know that Smoke Monday, man, I actually saw the video footage of this. That was an incredible play by Smoke Monday. The ball was well placed by Bo Nix on an out route to Sal Cannella, and Smoke Monday just made a huge play in the end zone. And that's very encouraging because one of the things that we talked about is the secondary position. That's been a course of concern for me, especially that nickelback position where Javaris Davis played last year. And we remember there were some plays, especially not only the LSU game where Auburn gave up that big play to help LSU usher themselves back into the ball game, but in the mid to late third quarter against Alabama, where Tua Tagovailoa just really, really started to exploit some of those weaknesses that Auburn had in the secondary on their way to a 52-21 win. Probably, I think, the most points that Kevin Steele has allowed since he's been the defensive coordinator for the Auburn Tigers. So this is what I'm looking at going into week 2. I really want to know how the linebackers are doing and how the secondary is doing. Of course, we find out that KJ Britt actually did not play in the scrimmage. He sat out the scrimmage. He's an undisclosed injury. Seems to be nothing really, really serious. But those are still areas of concern for the Tigers. Also, with how the defense dominated, do we have the whole story of that level of domination? It's one of those situations where it's a very elementary question. Is the defense that good, or does Auburn not have enough time to get themselves together offensively headed into the Advocare Classic? Because there's a few elements involved. You have 2 freshman quarterbacks, whether it's going to be the red shirt, Joey Gatewood, or it's going to be true freshman, Bo Nix. Bo Nix threw a couple of interceptions in that ball game. So, in my opinion, I think right now Joey Gatewood probably low-key has the edge at this point. Now, there will be a scrimmage this Wednesday. Gus Malzahn said, hey, we 100% need some more information. And that information will come via the scrimmage this coming Wednesday. Another thing we want to look at is who's going to, take over Dontavius Russell's spot at that defensive tackle position. Because we know Dontavius Russell with his big frame, and when he did play at a high level, he played very well. But there were some plays that he did sit out. Like I don't think a lot of times Dontavius Russell gave his overall best effort, but it was enough for him to earn a spot on an NFL roster. So those are some huge questions for the Tigers as we literally time is starting to elapse as far as preparation for the Advocare Classic. So also with the receiver position, Anthony Schwartz with the injury, thought that he was going to be one of the more, receivers that can actually create some imbalance for the opposing defenses, is actually questionable as to whether he is going to be available for the Oregon game because, of course, he broke his hand during some blocking drills, and that's something that when Gus Malzahn is in charge of the offense, wide receivers have to block. If you look at some of the plays in 2013, you'll see wide receivers blocking within the inside of the intermediate part of the football field, meaning that they were active participants in the blocking schemes at the point of attack, which is a very unique situation for Gus Malzahn and his run pass option style of running the offense. So if you're going to be a receiver with Gus Malzahn, you got to block. And that's probably something that, he wasn't quite ready for, considering that he missed spring training because of track, and people talk about strength and conditioning and all those different kind of things. But I mean, breaking a wrist blocking, that's not necessarily a strength and conditioning issue. That's just bad luck. You know what I'm saying? So I'm really excited going into this next week to see some of the stories that will unfold for the Auburn Tigers, because this is a very, very, very unique season for the Tigers. It's kind of a crossroad for Auburn. One, how many games does Gus Malzahn have to win to retain his job? Two, with that same element, man, look at the recruiting efforts in the offseason. These guys are not recruiting as if you have a coach on the hot seat. You talk about going from number 29 in midsummer, and all of a sudden, you're pushing to be one of the high recruiting classes in the country. That's why even more so now than ever, the outcome of this season is very important, because, what if for some reason this season tanks and you lose somewhat of your future? We want to put stock on every season, but this is a real tricky situation for Auburn. Now, if Auburn was at a point where, you're talking about still at an 18 recruiting class, from a perception standpoint, you're like, okay, well, guys are not really buying into what's happening at Auburn or what's happening with Gus Malzahn and his hot seat situation. But these guys are signing up. You're talking about Tank Bigsby, Trenton Simpson, Wesley Steiner. I mean, these are actually really, really good football players who are committing to Auburn, even in the midst of all of the kind of chaos, maybe perceived dysfunction, disarray. It makes it really difficult. And I'm pretty sure the typical Auburn fan is thinking really don't know how to take all of this in. Then on top of that, with the whole true freshman, redshirt freshman quarterback thing, you're talking about in a couple of weeks, you're having to face Oregon, who more than likely, based on all, information given, could be not only a top 10 team, but could be a Pac-12 contender. As a matter of fact, if you look at most polls for the Pac-12, you got Utah, Washington, and Oregon around that 11, 12, 13, 14 range, but they can interchange. You know what I'm saying? They can interchange just like in the SEC West. You got Alabama, who is a unanimous number one. We're going to talk about Tua Tagovailoa before this video is over. But you talk about Alabama, who rightfully so is a unanimous number one. They recruit well. They have access to great facilities. And they, are pretty deep as far as a roster go. Probably has the best roster overall in the SEC. And rightfully so, should be the unanimous number one in the SEC West, contrary to what even some of us on this channel, where it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger, would want to admit. However, when you talk about the 2, 3, and 4 spots, those spots are very interchangeable as it relates to the situation with Texas A&M, LSU, and Auburn. Auburn's first SEC game will take place against Texas A&M in College Station, where Auburn has played very well in College Station, never losing to Texas A&M since the inception of the rivalry back in 2020. I'm going to call Auburn and Texas A&M a rivalry already, because all of the games that they played have had such high consequence and such huge implications. But that's going to be a huge game. No matter the outcome of the Oregon game, that's going to be a huge game, because if Auburn can manage to be victorious over Texas A&M, as they were in 2013, which really started to get the the fire rolling in 2013 to say, hey, man, you know what? Auburn might be on to something. And sure enough, they were. That win against Texas A&M in 2013 really catalyzed Auburn all the way to the national championship game, and literally seconds away from their second national championship in a 3-year span. So a lot of moving parts for the Tigers. You know, you got great recruiting going on. You got a great quarterback battle going on, even though the scrimmage game, from all intents and purposes, from an offensive standpoint, was a little on the disappointing side. However, you have the guys that only been in camp for a week and probably trying some different things out. Also, you got a defense that, at the front line, the defensive line, these guys are, you talk about Nick Cole, Marlon Davidson, Derek Brown, the first set can play on an NFL roster, and then you talk about the backups, Tyrone Truesdale is probably, definitely want to, hopefully he can come on. Coinus Miller, who is really a freak athlete, I think, and I hope he can come on and really do some great things for the Tigers. And unfortunately, Daquan Newkirk, probably looking at a Achilles injury that may keep him out for the season, and that's very unfortunate for the Auburn Tigers when you talk about the future for the Tigers. Daquan Newkirk, obviously, with that Achilles injury, and it's just hard to recover from that, But Tyrone Truesdale, just want to see if he has the stamina to have the reps that Auburn needs at that position that Dontavius Russell was very good at, was very consistent at, even though he had some periods of quote-unquote laziness, I think, but still a mainstay at that particular position. Now, my favorite part about this is to what level is Derek Brown going to take his game? Because, like it or love it, he's been in the shadows of a lot of great defensive players in his tenure there and has just never had that breakout type deal for Auburn. He's just been a very good player. But what is it going to take for Derek Brown to take his level of play all the way up to, say, what we remembered of Nick Fairley? Guys like those, to where you have those memorable guys like, say, Senderick Marks, right? Is he going to be that guy that's going to take over the defense like, say, Nick Fairley did in 2020 and in 2010, I'm sorry, damn, I skipped 10 years, but in 2010, to where in that Alabama game where, in 2010, where Nick Fairley just literally took the game over and basically all but saved Auburn from a defensive standpoint in that particular game, especially given some momentum late there in the second quarter, creating that turnover where he sacked the quarterback. I can't think of the guy's name right now. Sorry about that, guys, but he sacked the quarterback and then comes around and recovers the fumble. So those huge kind of plays, those game-changing plays for Auburn during that particular time, is Derek Brown going to be that guy that makes those types of plays? Those turnover generating plays, creates those sacks, creates really a level of intimidation that Nick Fairley created. So I think it's a very exciting time for the Tigers. I think, it's a lot of anxiety because you really don't know which way this thing can go. And from a, traumatic / post-traumatic syndrome type status, you're like, man, is Gus going to screw this up? That's what the typical Auburn fan is asking. Is he going to screw it up? Is he going to set us up to where, or set the fan base up to where, You think things are going to go a certain way, but he has all this talent and then winds up going 8-5. That's the narrative right now. What's going to happen? We got a lot of good news, but is it, the typical Auburn fan wants to know, is it too good to be true? Is it too good to be true? You know, is Auburn really going to get over the hump and start to effectively competing with LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, Florida? Now these guys are starting to emerge because of great recruiting. Is Auburn there? Is Auburn headed there? And in a couple of weeks, we're going to find out. You know, the game against Oregon is going to at least tell us something as to what direction this program is headed in. Because you get to the Evercare Classic and Oregon just, you know, dumps Auburn all over the field, then we have a whole nother conversation that's going to take place. Flipping over to the rival Alabama, Tua Tagovailoa just had the SEC by storm in his first few games. Matter of fact, a lot of those games, there was a media outlet that talked about Tua Tagovailoa only having 588 plays and comparing that to Kyler Murray. But Tua didn't necessarily have to have all those plays because for a lot of those games, he only played one half. And it didn't make sense to continue to play him when you're playing a game against Southwest Louisiana or Louisville where you have 300 yards in the first half. You don't want to run the risk of getting the guy hurt. But you start with the LSU game, and Tua Tagovailoa really started to show some vulnerabilities. They mixed up some packages in the secondary, showed Tua Tagovailoa some different looks, and that's when you started to see a situation where you're not going to necessarily keep Tua from getting his yards or from getting his stats, but you have to provide a high level of disruption. And that's what teams did to him down that brutal SEC stretch, which started with LSU. They were somewhat uncharacteristic and only beating Mississippi State 24-0. Although they had an amazing third quarter out of Tua Tagovailoa, great performance against Auburn in the third quarter, well, mid to late third quarter, where he finished off with 5 touchdowns on the way to a 52-21 win over Auburn. But even Auburn, you know, forced Alabama to their first level of consecutive 3-and-outs. So here's the question. Can Tua Tagovailoa do it again? You have some people some folks are even saying that it was a one-hit wonder. I don't believe that. I think the guy's an incredible ball player. But how does Tua Tagovailoa approach the 2019 season? Kind of easy to approach it, though, because you got one of the best receivers in the country in Jerry Jeudy. But really, guys, that's the question. I want you all to talk about that in the comment section. Will Tua Tagovailoa be able to duplicate the domination in the SEC that he had last year, or have people figured, or have defensive coordinators, or have the college football world figured him out? Because the 2 games, you know, against Georgia and against Clemson really exposed somewhat of a side of vulnerability for Tua Tagovailoa, you know, and that's just something we just have to look at. You know, can he do it again? Can he be the impactful player that he was on last year again? So this is our sports talk for this morning, man. Auburn football sports talk. We might have another one this afternoon as Auburn gets ready for the second week of fall camp. Very exciting times. Glad college football is right around the corner. I hope you guys are excited as I am about this. Go ahead and leave a comment about what you think about some of the things we talked about. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.